As South Africa approaches the upcoming May elections, there are concerns about political violence. This comes after threats purportedly made by supporters of Umkhonto We Sizwe party. Religious leaders in KwaZulu-Natal have reportedly issued warnings to the Independent Electoral Commission, indicating intentions to shut the country for good if the MK party fails to secure a two-thirds majority in the upcoming polls. Additionally, Visvan Reddy, leader of the African Democratic Change and a member of the MK party, recently cautioned against a potential anarchy. These developments have raised questions about the stability and integrity of the election process. I'm now joined by political analyst Professor Kedibone Phago to unpack this. Prof, always good to speak to you. Now, in light of the recent threats by religious leaders, which is most unfortunate to disrupt the electoral process if their preferred party doesn't win, how significant is the role of religion in shaping political outcomes in South Africa? And certainly this is not something that we should be expecting from religious voices.
Yes, good afternoon, Hugo, and good afternoon to the viewers at home. Yes, it is indeed concerning that we are receiving such kind of threats from a sector that is expected to be promoting peace, harmony, unity, and, the prosperous society. But from where we come from as a society, especially during the apartheid eras, there was a project in the country to massify the struggle against apartheid. And one critical sector that rose to the occasion and ended up even taking some lead, especially if you remember during the United Democratic Front, the UDF. So you have got figures like Dr. Alan Busak, you've got somebody like Dr. Reverend Frank Chikani, you've got the Fathers Mangaliso Mkacha, you've got Desmond Tutu. So these are some of the individuals that symbolizes the role of religion in South Africa's fight against apartheid. And I think looking at their contribution, I am very sure that by and large we would be in a position to model what would be the role of religion at this particular aging point in South Africa.
So let's unpack the problem with incitement of electoral violence. And even if Mr. Reddy then went back and tried to clarify the issues, in the context that how many of those people that heard the initial message did not then hear the retraction, and what remains in their minds come election time?
Yes, and I think it's very unfortunate that as a country that has, for the past 30 years, made strides and efforts to consolidate democracy. And this is a very important issue for South Africa because we have a very difficult history as a nation. And to build a nation, you really need to make sure that violence and unsavory language, especially during election time, is actually minimized. So we need to make sure that we are alert and our institutions, the law enforcement, our security clusters are really all out to make sure that they clamp on this, because we do not want to see any situation that gives us a setback on our attempt to consolidate the democracy that really brings a situation that allows all South Africans from their diverse background to enjoy and make a contribution in the way that they can.
Do you think these statements, unfortunately as they are likely to influence the voting patterns of some sections of society?
It's true. So I saying something and then coming back and retracting it does not actually always send a very good message. But I think what we need to be careful about, especially from a leadership point of view, is that leaders need to be very measured in the way they speak in the society, and that they are able to articulate the message and even the positions of their political parties. But if we've got mixed messages from leaders of political parties, it then says that we are facing a governance challenge that may want some kind of intervention. Perhaps IEC should then stand up, or any other institution that is relevant to this, and say, what are the rules of engagement during the election period, and to what extent political parties have a room to say what they can say, especially cautioning against the language of violence, intimidation, because it will affect our election in a very negative way, and we need to avoid that at all costs, because the main message to electorates is that they need to go all out in their numbers and choose their leaders. And this is a very, very important democratic element that many of our freedom fighters died for. So we cannot, at this particular stage then, when we have to go and exercise our right on who should be in government, then come and face intimidation. It's a serious setback, and I think needs to be needs the institutions such as the IEC to stand up very quickly and give the marching orders to political parties that are taking part in these elections.
Professor Phago, you raise an issue that I wanted to speak to, and that's the role of the IEC in circumstances such as this in which we find ourselves. But does it also call on the MK party, whom Viswan Reddy is associated with, to make a stand and say, we do not advocate violence? Is it an opportunity for the president of the country, in fact, to call for peace and order ahead of the upcoming elections?
That's correct. So the president should really weigh in here, and the IEC. But it's a very difficult task, as it has panned out to be, that the IEC would be able to reach out to many of the political parties and really sort of enforce the regulations. So it is also within the political parties themselves that leaders need to stand up and guide their rank and file members and say how they should be conducting themselves. Because if we are only going to rely on our institutions, then it also questions the role of leadership in our society, especially during this critical time of political campaigning.
Prof, I want to shift away a little bit from this particular issue and focus on the elections that are coming up in a few months' time, and certainly a conversation on some of the new political parties that are coming on the scene, or certainly the smaller political parties. Now, in light of the numerous challenges around service delivery that South Africans have had to endure for the last 5 years, I mean, let's even talk about electricity, which has been for much, much longer than that. Is this an opportune time for the new political parties to stake a claim in governance, do you think?
Hugo, it's a very difficult issue at the moment, and it's a very important point as well that you are raising. But I think it means we are sitting in a crisis situation as South Africans, that every single leader believes that they should be able to contribute to our governance crisis by forming a political party. And I think this is really, for me, in my view, it's a tragedy, and we need to maybe find a way of regulating this to just minimize the number of political parties, because you cannot have every situation that is arising being addressed by a political party that believes that its views or its contribution will be able to solve the crisis. But if you look at these political parties and their ideological positioning, you realize that in terms of that, we do not really see a very major, contribution or entrance into the political space. And that should be worrying, because if you've got parties from the left that are splitting and then they all come and contest for political party, so the issue is, what value do they really want to offer and bring on the table? And I don't think that so far we have really had any meaningful thing, except the frustration, which is a legitimate frustration, as you correctly outlined, that we have a service delivery crisis in South Africa at the moment, that our infrastructure is collapsing in front of our eyes, our municipalities are dysfunctional, that ESCOM, we don't know if it is coming or going. So I think there is indeed a legitimate concern which needs leadership, but I do not think that to have this many political parties would serve as a solution to those problems.
Well, Professor, very quickly before we wrap up, Khanif Hendricks, the leader of Al Jamar Party, and I paraphrase, say this morning that women mustn't work, men must work for them. If they work, they must be rich. Now, you talk about ideology. What does it say to the people of South Africa, to the women of South Africa, and this month when we're celebrating women, when a leader speaks such words?
Yes, so I think it's an interesting input from Al Jamar, but we also need to know that Al Jamar's orientation is more Islamic, and probably I would imagine that his views are informed by his religious background. And that is accommodated within South Africa's constitution, because the constitutional democracy allows the space for various religious organizations to contribute into the society. So if the women he's talking about accept that, then unless it is challenged in the courts, obviously the courts will be ruling against the institution. Will be ruling in favor, in line with the constitutional premises that says that we do not discriminate against gender, against race, and sexual orientation, and so on. So I think it is something interesting that is coming from Al Jamadi.